Recently, a district court in the state of New York threw out an Emoluments Clause lawsuit against Donald Trump, arguing that the plaintiffs in the case did not have standing. They were not specifically harmed by the president taking money from foreign governments and even from American citizens. That wasn't hurting the plaintiffs at all, the district court ruled. Well, last week, in a little noticed story, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals in the state of New York said, oh, no, district court. These people absolutely do have standing. And we're going to reinstate this Emoluments Clause lawsuit against the President of the United States. This is a huge leap forward in these emoluments lawsuits. Right now, there's 3 separate Emoluments Clause lawsuits happening in the United States. The other 2 were still going forward. It was just this one that had been thrown out and has now been reinstated. And here's what the issue is. As we've talked a lot about emoluments in the form of foreign dignitaries and whoever coming and staying at Trump's hotels. They pay money to stay there. That money goes to the Trump Organization profits. The profits go back into Donald Trump's pockets. That's an emolument. That is illegal. But there's also domestic emoluments, which is essentially the same thing. If an average American citizen decides to waste their money spending a night in Trump's hotel, that money goes through the same cycle. Back to the organization in the form of revenue, down into Trump's pocket eventually. That's a domestic emolument, and that is one of the things this particular lawsuit is focusing on. Some of the other ones focusing more on the foreign ones, but it's the domestic ones where he's really raking in the money. Here's what these judges had to say in this opinion. The president's establishments offer government patrons something that plaintiffs cannot: the opportunity, by enriching the president, to obtain favorable governmental treatment from the president and the executive branch. And that is why they're saying, no, these people do have standing, because they're put at a disadvantage in terms of getting a favor from the president compared to somebody who can afford to go and be a patron of the president's businesses. And that's absolutely true. We've all heard the stories of how he's got these wealthy folks down at Mar-a-Lago who are not in the government at all, by the way, but he's consulting with them about policy. So they get to have his ear just because they have money, and that money goes back into Trump's pocket. So technically, everybody in this country that's not a member of Mar-a-Lago, that's not a member of Bedminster, that's not staying at one of Trump's hotels and never has, we could also potentially be claimants here if this were to make it into a class action. So just something to kind of keep on the horizon, folks, because yes, we are all at the same disadvantage. But here's the thing, and I love explaining this because it is so disgusting. Donald Trump did not divest from his companies. He did put his own personal money into a blind trust that he has an executor for. Unfortunately, that happens to be Donald Trump Jr. And Trump Jr. has to get Daddy's permission, Trump has to get Don Jr.'s permission in order to see how the money's doing and see where he's putting it, and then give advice. So yeah, that's not exactly a blind trust when your idiot son who'll do whatever you say because he's desperate for your love and attention is the one man standing between you and your money. And again, you still get the profits from the Trump Organization. He did not divest. He is not, as he says, losing billions of dollars. He's not a saint because he's giving away his $400,000 a year salary. Hell, the Secret Service has spent more than that trying to rent golf carts and jet skis to protect Trump's family. All money, again, that goes back into Trump's profits. So, losing that $400,000 a year salary is quite literally pennies compared to what he's pulling in from U.S. taxpayers, from the Secret Service, and from foreign dignitaries. And those are exactly the kinds of things that these Emoluments Clause lawsuits are trying to bring to an end. Thanks for watching, everybody. And don't forget, if you like what you see here, like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. And now you can also become a member of Ring of Fire and get exclusive early access to certain Ring of Fire videos all throughout the week. Just click on the little join button right below the video.